What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. I'm going to be going away for a few days, so no streams or videos till I get back, but wanted to make one final video talking about the massive tank overhaul and how it's going to affect the entire game. Our last two videos, we covered different subjects, the basics of it to begin, and then some advanced statistics to know what the ripple effects are going to be. Now, in today's video, let's discuss the knock-on effects on the entire metagame. Okay, quick recap. 4 major changes coming on May 14th. Every tank is going to have a benefit of better self-healing, so you won't have to run off to health packs, bit of quality of life, but I do think helps tanks maintain in on their positions without having to vacate them, especially between fights. That's going to be helpful to have better self-heal than the other characters in the game. The tank passive goes to 50% knockback resistance. That alone is one of the stronger buffs in this whole patch because not every tank is going to benefit from it equally. Because not every tank needs to go in to be effective nowadays in Overwatch 2. Many of them are shooter tanks that can stay at medium or even long range sometimes. Armor is going back to Overwatch 1 armor. However, we have a lot more different characters and the game plays differently than Overwatch 1 did. All armor is losing the 30% damage resistance effect to instead be -5 damage only per instance of damage up to 50%. The two types of weapons that are affected the most by this is spread weapons that are shotgun based essentially, fast rate of fire weapons like Bastion, Mauga. If your DPS racks up in very small quick increments, the new armor is going to be more effective against that damage. But what we found in our previous video, looking at some spreadsheets on how the math pans out, the burst damage, especially if you weren't even needing headshots before, body shot damage does more damage to armor than before, so time to kill on tanks is kind of smoothed out. It's faster overall versus those damage types, but armor's more durable against other damage types. Then to sort of compensate that, all tanks are getting 25% damage resistance to headshots. Now, quick recap on how the numbers of this works, and we'll get into the worries that I've seen you guys express to me over the comment section and on live streams discussing this subject. That headshot resistance does mean characters like Sigma, Junker Queen, and Zarya, especially, I'd say, that were weak to headshots before. You can add Mauga to that list. They will be slowed down with how effective headshots are, but I think knowing how time to kill tends to work in this game, knowing how easy those headshots are to hit, especially by a lot of projectile characters, I think this is one that you're going to be surprised how little difference it makes. Yes, there are characters that didn't have damage resistance before that now will have a bit of it, but I think tank players know that even having the armor didn't mean you would live forever anyway. It was more so armor plus abilities that tend to make tanks live forever. And I think it's important to note that the devs are trying to attack this from both angles, because when the tank is winning in a winning matchup, tanks kind of dominated, but as soon as they were counterpicked, then they would get rolled. I think we've all seen Winston's, Junker Queens, Doomfists look like they're utterly taking over the lobby because they're not properly getting countered, and I think that's a bad part of the game. And even worse if it's a character like Orisa, who's kind of obnoxious to deal with. They did knock her down several pegs with hefty nerfs, but the feeling like your characters can't do anything against certain tanks also incentivizes counterpicking. Like, it's a double-edged sword, guys. I know we don't like that counterpicking is so powerful in the game, but it also maybe shouldn't be needed to have an impact, right? That's what the benefit, the big benefit, I'd say, to these other characters being more reliable at dealing consistent damage to tanks means that you won't feel like you have to counterpick to over-invest to destroy the enemy tank just to have a fighting chance. There's a bit of a rubber hits the road with this argument, because how much should we expect the player base to need to outskill a type of matchup rather than be able to have easy cheat codes, essentially, to counterpick to something easy? There's a long list of subjects that we're going to go through, the first of which I think I saw a lot of you guys talk about being worried that medium range damage would then reign supreme and might feel oppressive against tanks. But I don't really feel that's the case, because although their time to kill is a bit better, Ashe, Widow, Cassidy, Hanzo, these types of characters, tanks have engagement tools and damage denial tools that are effective against them. It's characters that are like tank busty and tanky themselves that typically are really hard to deal with as a tank player, whether it's Reaper, Bastion, these types of picks. Those you could kind of just pick and look at the general direction of a certain tank, especially the ones you feel like you can counter, and really control the matchup. This was a major problem of Overwatch 2 so far, that these anti-tank characters were so sustainable in their own right, they could kind of just exist in the formation and put an undue amount of pressure onto the tank and force them to swap, which is lame, I think. None of us really want that to be the case. Now, every Overwatch video has to mention 6v6 at some point, so of course, in Overwatch 1, this same thing happened. You just maybe wouldn't swap your tank and just hope everyone else could figure it out for you. But if you were on the wrong tank or had a wrong tank playstyle for the given situation, you'd get rolled as Zarya against a Pharah, and your team might pray that you pick D.Va to counter that entire interaction, but it didn't happen. It's not like anyone liked playing with a Roadhog when he was getting countered in Overwatch 1 either. So whatever type of format we're in, these types of changes to the foundation of the tank role I think would be helpful, because let's not forget, they really tried to give the tank players a lot of agency to do things like deal with flyer picks as Maga, have their own mechanical outplays as Junker Queen, Ramatra, these types of characters that can hit shots in order to carry the game, as opposed to just hold and take space and hope the team uses cooldowns into them. That's the whole foundation of the game we're playing today, guys. So overall, I'd say that's a big boost to tank gameplay, both the knockbacks that otherwise would halt your engage or the specific damage types that will be more prevalent are easier for you to interact with. The goal isn't to make tanks oppressive, it's just to kind of like smooth out the game experience. I'd much rather be trying to outplay those medium range or long range damage characters, even if they're a bit more effective than me, rather than these overstatted tank busty style tankish DPS picks that are really hard to clear, and you sort of just have to wait them out more so than engage on them or manipulate the engagement. That's what's kind of lame against going against Reaper, Bastion, etc. From the other standpoint, I know a lot of players are worried that those heroes like Reaper and Bastion will be useless as picks. But to be honest, they've been kind of overpowered for a while. It's way too lame that a Reaper can have a very reliable playstyle just chasing the tank around, doing nothing else. But whereas perhaps in Overwatch 1, you sort of had a better benefit to look to put resources into your tank to win the tank fight, now in Overwatch 2, it's much easier to swap to something that's anti-tank to win the tank fight. So it losing some ground I don't think is a bad thing, but at the same time, it's not like the tank is easily going to kill the Reaper either. So him being able to just hold his position, lifesteal, is still going to be good. It's just the severity of these playstyles goes down. I think a lot of players, myself included, even when I stream and try to grind, think of the game incorrectly in terms of what kill can I get immediately, because kills feel good. You get an elimination, man advantage, it seems like then you instantly win, but the game isn't really about that. It's more about the prolonged fight, all of the exchange of the full team comp, the position you have, and winning later on. That one kill, if you had to lose too many resources to get it, might not be good enough anyway, and it's easy to forget that, and is probably one of the bigger mistakes that players make in Overwatch. So in that way, if you play a Reaper with the positional mindset of winning over time and being a brawly character that's hard to be vacated, you're still a good character. It's just you won't be able to two-tap the Winston as easily. Like, you'll have an extra second or shot to interact with your ability to fight him. And I think that type of design and aiming the tank interactions to play like that is going to be a lot better for the health of the game. Another thing I've been hearing players worry about is the characters that didn't have armor before that will now have headshot resist. So your Sigma, Junker Queen, Maga, Zarya. I think Sigma and Zarya's playstyle is pretty moderate in Overwatch 2. Like, you see it coming, it's a bit slow, it takes time to get going, it's not instant like Junker Queen and Roadhog. So I don't really mind them having a bit more sustain, because their playstyle, it doesn't really take over the game quickly like other tanks can. So I think it's pretty fair to interact with. And when they do have windows of exploitability, I still think you will feel like you can kill them, because they're slow and easy to pin down if you're overwhelming them. Oftentimes those tanks are losing to other tanks. Plus the addition of getting crossfired and shot, they're pretty limited in what they do. When characters like Winston or Reinhardt counter their playstyle anyway, I kind of don't mind them gaining a bit of power generally across the board, because Winston and Rein and Ball are better in general against everything, because those engagement tanks are probably going to be better than them anyway, given the way this new patch is going. Like, why play slow and moderate and pokey if you could just go engage on something better and take over the game quicker? I'm not worried about those slow playstyles being too good. Now, on the other hand, we're looking at characters like Junker Queen and Roadhog. These characters do have the instant burst impact. Hog a bit more so recently, Junker Queen a bit up and down, and probably significantly harder to play. Those characters get scary when they're too good in ranked. And I think one of the biggest upsides of this entire patch is counter tank tank picks are much worse than they were before. Diva, Roadhog, and Junker Queen against armor is really going to be slowed down. Now, you may still have a matchup advantage, positional advantage. The thing that I haven't liked about Overwatch 2's tank gameplay is oftentimes it's best for the tank to go to the cart. Like, you can clear high ground, then you go to cart. And if your tank beats their tank, you sort of just easily win the objective eventually over time. So because of that, swapping to a shotgun character against a regular engagement style tank character felt way too easy. I still think in some ways it might still be easy because Hog can CC the Winston. Junker Queen, Hog, Mauga, Diva, they all have playstyle strengths still, being able to single target damage the Winston, let's say, as Diva. It just will take longer to kill him. Just because you don't instantly kill these characters doesn't mean you don't still have outplay. And I think that's an important thing to add back into Overwatch 2, is to feel like those matchups have texture to them and it's not instantly winning them. I already felt Diva was pretty good against Roadhog, to be honest, either saving her teammate when he tries to hook them or kind of face tanking some of the hooks as long as the trap damage doesn't land. The armor health already thinned out his shotgun damage a lot. Now it's going to be way more effective. So Winston, Reinhardt, these picks are going to be able to like really press an advantage and speed up the tempo of the game. A lot of Overwatch 2 has been slower, holding your position and poking for advantage as opposed to engaging and setting the tempo unless you have a full team doing it. I think it might be the case that the space creation tanks will be the best they've ever been in the history of the sequel, and possibly even too strong, honestly. I've been watching everyone's opinions on this, and I think high-level players are a little bit afraid of a character like Reinhardt or Winston kind of being uncounterable, because like Winston was already good in organized play. He just takes coordination, of course. And there's added layers to this as well, as I've gained nearly 1,000 games of tank played and up and down the ranks, guys. I've been through the entire roller coaster of ranks, seeing how different players adapt, and me myself making mistakes into the, let's say, play styles of a given rank. I might say it's objectively wrong the way people play at that rank, but to rank up as a tank player, you kind of have to have an interesting tweaked mindset in order to overcome the typical play pattern of how the enemy looks to counter you and what your team will do alongside you. Overwatch 2 is a bit of an issue in this regard, precisely because there is tanks with skill expression, right? This means something different to everybody, but not just Overwatch engagement skill, but aim skill. So there's a lot of tank players that maybe you're good at Roadhog and you can utilize just your aim to get away with winning the game. So our community really hasn't been trained on how to play with and against these engagement style tanks oftentimes. So I think this patch is going to hit us like a truck a bit, because all of a sudden now you're going to have to learn to outplay things that you could counter pick more easily before, wondering what the hell do we do now? While the Season 9 changes were transformative, I'm not so sure they changed the foundation of how we play, other than maybe brawly rush playstyles got a bit better. This patch coming the 14th, because it's so radically different to the tank experience, the whole community is going to have to relearn how we play the game again. Blizzard's in a bit of a tricky situation because it feels like they go routinely through balance passes between the roles. At the launch of the game, tank was looked at as very hype because it had the most changes, transforming the identity of the role entirely, going down to 1. They considered calling it a brawler, and there was new tank heroes and playstyles, and they kind of rolled over some of the other picks of the game, namely the supports, kind of had to run for their lives a lot of the time. Then over time, the support role got 3 additional characters, adding to a lot of options as well as a host of buffs to interact. DPS were left high and dry, then they got a passive. Now we're back onto tanks again. And before we go around this entire circle again for a year, I want to pause at this patch. Let us try to learn it, like not judge it too quickly, and see what do we want to see in Overwatch. Do we want to see hero pick diversity? Do we want to see hero swaps to be super effective or somewhat effective? Do we want engagement and teamwork style tanks to be better, or aim reliant tanks to be better? Because a lot of these are mutually exclusive, guys. They were mutually exclusive in 6v6 or 5v5. When we had a Giga Hog meta, there wasn't a lot of Ryan and Winston getting played, right? Regardless of their major format decisions, they're going to have to really decide how these interactions are going to work. Or, you know, they could finally just add hero bans and we could maybe not expect the balance to solve all of our problems always. Because if I've learned anything about this community, they will find the easiest route to value, and that's what we'll end up playing. And for me anyway, I would vote to have the characters in the game that are less all in on their cooldown interactions, just like Bastion transforming to win, and more on characters that are either exploitable or take some sort of execution to be useful. That's when I think the game is most interesting. I like counterpicking, I just don't want it to be too easy. And while the devs aren't really selling this patch as being about counterpicking, I think that's going to be a very surprising knock-on effect, seeing as quite a few counterpicks are going to be worse than they were before, and a lot of tanks will be more stable than you're used to them being on the battlefield. Hey guys, I gotta get going, gotta hop on a plane. If you like this video, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.